The best move the New Orleans Saints have made all offseason is the move they didn't make for Deshaun Watson. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into this Wednesday episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. You can find me over at USA Today's Saints Wire Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at BlueNile.com. Make the moments in your life sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners are going to get $50 off of purchases $500 or more. This includes this podcast exclusive engagement as well. Use promo code Locked On at checkout. Tell you more about them a little later. But for today's episode, want to break down what the New Orleans Saints have done since missing out on Deshaun Watson and why not trading for Deshaun Watson turned into almost the best case scenario for the New Orleans Saints, especially with recent news continuing to pile up around the embattled quarterback. Then we're going to talk a little bit and break down a quick look at why Ndamukong Suh would be a really, really good signing for the New Orleans Saints and perhaps put them over the top. Does he fit in the locker room? Does he fit the culture? And how does he fit the scheme? We'll break all of that down, talk a little bit about techniques on the defensive line as well. And finally, we'll wrap up with a look at Michael Thomas running. That's really great news there, but we'll talk about why it's actually important, not just that he's running, but there's an extra detail here. And something new in today's episode, 2-minute take to wrap up the show about this year's 2022 NFL draft class. How we feel about it 3 years from now. I'll give you my thoughts in 2 minutes or less. All right, let's get started with Deshaun Watson. So the New Orleans Saints were in hot pursuit of the embattled quarterback, who of course has, I think it's now 23 civil cases of sexual misconduct levied against him, 66 massage therapists in 17 months, all these crazy stories coming out thanks to some fantastic reporting over at New York Times and everything. So there's a whole bunch of new information coming out around Deshaun Watson. And we kind of talked about this, right? Like if the New Orleans Saints were going to make that move and were going to make that decision, then they were sort of banking on the idea that everything was just going to kind of fall off and get left in the dust somehow or another. And it doesn't seem that that has been the case. And now the Cleveland Browns and their $230 million fully guaranteed contract have to deal with that. Now, because of the fact that there's new allegations and things like that, that may end up negating some of his guaranteed money that they ended up giving him. But at least the main point here is that the New Orleans Saints don't have to deal with it. And because of that, they've been able to do a lot in free agency and to help build their team and try to build this contender going into 2022. And again, I believe truly that the best move that the Saints have made so far this offseason is the move they didn't end up making in being able to trade for Deshaun Watson. So let's just kind of recall how this all happened. And I'll tell you kind of what the New Orleans Saints have done since then. And then we'll ask the simple question, either or, which one would you rather? March 18th. Is when Deshaun Watson agreed to be traded, right? He had the no trade clause, all these other things, agreed to be traded to the Cleveland Browns. At that time, the Saints had opened up about $30 million of salary cap space. They're about $70 million over the cap to start the offseason, right? They got under that by the time that the league year began, and then they freed up another about $25 to $30 million after getting under the salary cap. So they sat there with a huge chunk of change that had been, effectively made so that they could get Deshaun Watson under the salary cap, restructure his deal, and make a little bit more money. Since they didn't make that trade, here's what the New Orleans Saints have done. Re-signed Jameis Winston to a 2-year contract, which is effectively a 1-year contract, but a 2-year contract. They re-signed Traquan Smith. They get Deontay Hardy to sign his tender, his 1-year tender. They sign safety Tyrann Mathieu. They land 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick, which they were able to easily fit under their salary cap. And this included the trade that they made to double their first-round picks, effectively advancing next year's first-round pick, but they had the ability to be able to do it. And then they signed Jarvis Landry. In the midst of all that, or in addition to all that, they also bring in a bunch of depth. Kahale Waring, Josh Andrews, Eric Wilson, the linebacker, the depth pieces they would have been able to bring in with Deshaun Watson as well. But making signings like Tyrann Mathieu, Jarvis, Landry, of course, they wouldn't have brought back Jameis Winston in that case, but they still end up with a very good quarterback here. Getting Traquan Smith back, getting Deontay Hardy back, getting those 2 first-round picks to build around the offense, adding a second-round pick. All of those things were all done with the salary cap space that was used to effectively get ready for a potential trade for Deshaun Watson, and the Saints still have about $10 million left over. So if I were to ask you, would you rather Deshaun Watson, or would you rather Jameis Winston, Traquan Smith, Deontay Hardy, Tyrann Mathieu, Chris Olave, Trevor Penning, Alontae Taylor, and Jarvis Landry? Those 2 things don't immediately correlate, but I'm still going to take the second side of that, right? I'm still going to give me this team that you've been able to build instead of handicapping yourself for a quarterback that you end up having to hope will elevate the talent around him, and also you hope will hit the field. And at this point, we don't know, right? And the Saints wouldn't have known. The Saints would be in the same situation right now the Cleveland Browns are in right now, to where there's no real identifier here, or there's no real solid piece here that tells you like Deshaun Watson's going to hit the field in 2022. So what would you have spent all of those assets for? And, I mentioned the first round picks and all that. And one of the reasons why I mentioned that is because you would have had to trade that and levy all of that against, or not levy it against, but you would have had to trade all of that and get rid of all that in that trade. So guys like Chris Olave, Trevor Penning, Alontae Taylor, even potentially, you wouldn't have been able to draft this year, right? You turn that first round pick that would have been like 1 first round pick this year, and then the next 2 first round picks probably to get Deshaun Watson in New Orleans. You turn those 2 picks into 2 first round picks this year, and then you walked away with Trevor Penning and Chris Olave. And that's going to be sort of the very top of this draft class, which is going to be the thing that we're going to look back 3 years from now and say, here's how this draft class performed, and it's going to be based on those 2 guys. And you look now at the excitement around the New Orleans Saints, and what are people excited about? They're excited about Tyrann Mathieu being back in New Orleans. They're excited about Jarvis Landry being back in New Orleans. They're excited about the triplet, the triumvirate of Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, and Chris Olave. Some of that excitement goes away if you traded for Deshaun Watson. You wouldn't have had the draft capital. You might not have had the money that you needed in order to make things happen. So it's just really interesting to sort of look at the 2 and see what the New Orleans Saints have done since they effectively struck out on Deshaun Watson, as they and the Falcons seemed to be the final 2 teams, and then all of a sudden the Cleveland Browns came in at the last minute. But I love what the New Orleans Saints have been able to do since then in turning what was effectively something that I think some people actually had their hopes up for, was landing Deshaun Watson. Now, even those folks that really wanted the Saints to land Deshaun Watson are probably pretty happy with what the Saints have done in lieu of landing Deshaun Watson. So in any case, you have to be pretty excited about what the Saints have done so far based upon being able to build this team with the resources that they freed up and did not have to give up in order to land Deshaun Watson in the first place. Now, you're hoping that when Sean Payton decides that he wants to coach again, which will probably be next year, I would imagine, I'm going to guess, that, they'll be able to trade his rights to the team that wants to hire him. So hopefully you're going to get another first round pick back from next year. You might get another first round pick in 2023 or 2024 in that case as well. We'll see how that all goes, but you're in a really good position here to continue to load up on draft capital and continue to build this team, as opposed to the draft capital you would have had to give up in that Watson trade. So best move of the offseason is the move that the Saints didn't make. The best remaining move that the New Orleans Saints can make this offseason, outside of maybe signing Quan Alexander, Odell Beckham Jr., those guys that are hometown guys that you know and love, would be signing all-pro defensive tackle Ndamukong Suh. We'll break down his fit on the field, how he would fit in the locker room, and what it would take to make that deal happen. We'll break all that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. But before we get to that, I want to tell you about our friends over at BlueNile.com, because Blue Nile is the best way for you to be able to celebrate all of life's special moments. So whether you're creating a custom engagement ring, or maybe you are just trying to gift, something from their fine jewelry collection to mark a special moment, something that's timeless, you're going to be able to find all of that at prices that you won't find at traditional jewelers over at BlueNile.com. So whether you're ready to pop the question, or you're looking at celebrating some big time milestone with things like tennis bracelets and diamond studded earrings and all of that, you're going to be able to find it with the convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. And no matter what it is that you're looking for, there's going to be jewelry experts on hand 24/7 to help you out in case you have any questions or need any help navigating the website, although it's super simple. So make the moments in your life sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com. And Locked On Sports listeners are going to get $50 off of purchases $500 or more whenever you purchase. Now, This podcast exclusive does include engagement. Just use the promo code locked on. That's code locked on so that you can go ahead and get that rate. Every order is insured. It ships direct, and it ends up coming in a situation, a nice little discreet packaging so that you don't end up giving away the surprise that's inside. So shop stress-free and find your forever piece at BlueNile.com today. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, you can help us out here at the Locked On Podcast Network by heading over to lockedonpodcasts.com/survey to take our listener survey. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, what we could be doing better, what you want us to do more of. All of that you can find and help us out big time as you continue to help us grow this network over at lockedonpodcasts.com/survey. Okay, so the next biggest move that the New Orleans Saints could make that would help to take their defense over the top going into the 2022 NFL season would be signing former All-Pro, former Tampa Bay Buccaneer, former, where else did he play? Detroit Lions? Played a whole bunch of different places. Former Commanders Palace dinner date of Sean Payton's, Ndamukong Suh. Now you remember the New Orleans Saints pursued Suh. That's really nice. It's a good little pun. But they really kind of wined and dined him, did the whole thing, and then he ended up signing elsewhere. But this could be the opportunity for the New Orleans Saints to finally make good on that, right? We've seen them do it, right? Jarvis Landry has been a free agent before, and the Saints didn't get him. Tyrann Mathieu has been a free agent before, and the Saints didn't get him. Now you've got Ndamukong Suh, who's a free agent now, who's been a free agent before. The Saints didn't get him. Can they get him this season? And why would he fit? Well, let's start with the on-field fit, because I think that he would help take this defense over the top. The biggest question mark remaining on the New Orleans Saints team as a whole that doesn't have anything to do with a suspension, right? Because you can talk about running back as that big question mark. I completely understand that. But until we actually know what Alvin Kamara's suspension is or isn't, then there's nothing really to talk about there. But defensive tackle, there's a lot to talk about because the New Orleans Saints are a team that builds their identity by stopping the run first. If you have a weak defensive interior, and particularly with the quarterbacks within your division, like Tom Brady, if you can't get the interior pressure, then you end up in a lot of trouble. Right? You want to get interior pass rush pressure. You want to be disruptive in the middle. You want to be able to be a good run-stopping team in the middle. This is what the New Orleans Saints have based their defensive identity on since 2017 with Ryan Nielsen. So I think Ndamukong Suh is a great fit. Here's why. You look at David Onyemata's snaps from 2021. We're not really going to pay attention to like overall stats because he missed the first 6 games of the season, all of that, but there will be a couple of little stats that we'll look at, but mostly it's percentages and splits here. So 29% of David Onyemata's 2021 snaps came at nose tackle, and we're going to kind of make this a bit of a midweek fundamental situation as well. I'll explain to you defensive line techniques as we go through, but we'll do it in context. So nose tackle is basically lining up. If you're a defensive tackle, you're lining up nose to nose with the center. So you and I are staring each other right in the face. You're snapping the ball and I'm coming at you. I'm snapping the ball. You're coming directly at me, right? Or you're two gapping, right? You're choosing which side you're going. So with that, 29% there. On those snaps, which were 121 total snaps, he had 1 tackle for a loss, 1 sack, 3 hits, 14 total pressures. Really good stuff, right? 71% of his defensive tackle snaps, he took some at edge. He had some to where he dropped back. There were some technically like linebacker snaps that he took and things like that too, which are that's just Dennis Allen being creative. But just focusing on what he did in the middle, nose tackle 29%, defensive tackle 71%. Now there's a couple of different versions of defensive tackle, right? So that's basically playing like a 2 inside, or which would basically mean playing over the guard but kind of shading in a little bit. 3 tech is going to put you in between the guard and the tackle. That's what you usually see next to or across from one of those guys. 1 tech is going to put you in the A gap right in between the center and the guard. So there's a bunch of different techniques that you can end up playing. Even 4I, which would be on the inside shoulder of the tackle on whichever side you're lining up. So there's a whole bunch of different defensive tackle techniques, basically. But across all of those, he played 71% of his snaps. Makes sense. There, he only had 1 tackle for a loss and 4 hits, but still had 20 pressures. So pretty similar production over the course of his 303 defensive tackle snaps and his 121 nose tackle snaps. Interesting to see that. But you look at Ndamukong Suh, 11% of his snaps in 2022 were at that nose tackle spot, 1 tackle for a loss, 2 QB hits, 4 pressures on 74 snaps. Now he's played at that spot more in the past. 2020, 332 snaps there at nose tackle. 2019, 148 nose tackle snaps, but only 74 in 2021. But he played 89% of his snaps at defensive tackle, which again are those other techniques that we just talked about, right? 6 tackles for a loss, 6 sacks, 558 plays, 12 total hits, 17 hurries, and 31 total pressures. Those 31 pressures that he got in 585 snaps at defensive tackle, which does not include his nose tackle snaps, are more pressures than the combination of all non-David Onyemata New Orleans Saints defensive tackles last year. That's why Ndamukong Suh should be a New Orleans Saint. That's why the New Orleans Saints should go after Ndamukong Suh, because of his ability to be able to create pressure from everywhere. And even when you give him a limited amount of snaps, he's still putting up pressures. Getting 4 total pressures, including a tackle for a loss with 2 quarterback hits on 74 snaps is really good production. But being able to turn around 31 total pressures just with your defensive tackle snaps and outpace the combination of all Saints defensive tackles outside of David Onyemata in 2022, who missed 6 games, and he himself outpaced the rest of the defensive tackle room or defensive tackle unit. That's huge. And that's the type of production the Saints didn't have next to David Onyemata last year that they need next to David Onyemata this year. And especially the versatility between both of these guys, that they can both play nose tackle and defensive tackle. It reminds you a lot of what the Saints had in Malcolm Brown, which is a spot that the New Orleans Saints have been trying to fill. Malcolm Brown, Tyler Davidson, like they have these guys that they really like that can play nose tackle, but that can also be a disruptive 3-tech. Can also be a disruptive 1-tech that can do a lot of these other things around the defensive line as a whole. You even have edge rusher snaps from Ndamukong Suh, which you're not really going to use a lot, but because the Saints run so many stunts and they swing guys like Cam Jordan and Peyton Turner, Peyton Turner as well, but Marcus Davenport more specifically last year, because they swing those guys inside and then you rush the other guys from the outside on those twists, then you end up creating all of these stunts that Ndamukong Suh and his veteran savvy already know how to run. Now, is he going to fit in the locker room? I think so, because you have to think about it's not just him, right? You have him. You've got Cam Jordan on that unit on the defensive line. You've got David Onyemata on that unit on the defensive line. You've got Demario Davis in that locker room, Tyrann Mathieu in that locker room, Marcus May, Marshawn Lattimore are all in that locker room. You got Jameis Winston pioneering the ship in terms of being the quarterback and leading and setting by example for the entire team. You have a defensive head coach. You have 2 defensive coordinators. There's not a lot to worry about here. And honestly, Ndamukong Suh was great for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers locker room and culture. He was really, really good as a part of that. I've asked around. He was really, really good in the locker room. And so I'm not worried about that part. And I don't think that, honestly, I look at the New Orleans Saints locker room as a place that fixes players if there was a concern. And I think that there's a limit to that, right? There's legal trouble, which is a whole different thing. But then there's just these guys that have this reputation of being bad for the locker room, even though there's not really any evidence that they're bad for the locker room. And I kind of, at least recently, and I kind of feel like Ndamukong Suh is just kind of falling under that because of maybe some old things that you can find from him in Detroit, for instance. He's been very good for that Tampa Bay locker room. I think he would be very good in the New Orleans Saints locker room, especially with the leadership that you have established there. So that, I believe, is the best remaining move for the New Orleans Saints to make this offseason. That doesn't include a former LSU name, right? Everyone's going to talk about Quan Alexander, OBJ, all of that. I'm looking at that defensive line and saying, man, if they just add Ndamukong Suh, that defense becomes even more unstoppable. It becomes the immovable force that you really, really want it to be by answering questions at all 3 levels. And I think that is the thing that makes New Orleans Saints a playoff team going into 2022. I think they're there already, but this takes them over the top. Coming up next, we're going to break down a look at Michael Thomas and what it means that he's running. We'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll give you my 2-minute take on the New Orleans Saints 2022 NFL draft class. What are they going to be, and what's going to be the deciding factor for their success 3 years from now? We got all that as we continue on to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. But first, I get to tell you about our friends over at Built Bar and their brand new flavor caramel brownie. I'm so excited about this one. So if you love chewy, chocolatey brownies, if you're already somebody that really loves the peanut butter brownie or the mint brownie, which are 2 of my favorite Built Bars, caramel brownie is right there with you because you got caramel swirled on top. It is so good. So you want to check it out because you get all of that. Plus, you get 17 grams of protein as well. And that's a trademark of Built Bar, right? It's not just tasting good. It's also good for you because you're in luck with those new caramel brownie bars. They're available now at built.com. Go right now, go and check them out because you're going to have to act fast because these tend to be a bit of a fan favorite when they do swing around. Remember how I said that they were 17 grams of protein? Well, only 130 calories and only 4 grams of sugar for caramel brownie. Does it get any better than that? I'll answer for you. It doesn't. The best part though, also still covered in 100% chocolate because that's how Built Bar be rolling. So like, this is super dope. So go and check it out. With Built Bar, you don't have to sacrifice tasty for healthy. You can have both. Go and check them out over at built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, so that you can get 15% off of your next order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we're here with you every Monday through Friday, even throughout the off season. Okay, big news across New Orleans Saints, sort of the fan base, social media, all this other stuff, was Michael Thomas taking to his Instagram, posting a video of him running sprints in the Saints training facility. Now, we also know that Michael Thomas has been running for like the last couple of months. So this isn't just the first time that we've seen Michael Thomas run since he had the ankle surgery, but there's a specific piece of detail in this video that I think is really important. So remember that the New Orleans Saints wide receiver, Michael Thomas, he reached out to Chris Olave immediately when Chris Olave was drafted, invited him out to California. They worked out together for like 10 days. And everything kind of got in the rhythm, an understanding of one another, how to compliment one another, working together, all these other things, right? Chris Olave talked about how much he learned from Michael Thomas, how much he learned from just watching Michael Thomas and observing Michael Thomas in that environment. Now you're seeing it yourself. And the thing that's most important about this video of Michael Thomas running in the New Orleans Saints training facility down the left sideline of the training facility is that it's in the New Orleans training facility. It's in Metairie. Here's why that's important. That likely means that this is a part of the steps of progress and recovery as set by the team. Remember that this is the first time that Michael Thomas has been with the New Orleans Saints, has been with the team since his surgeries. Last year, he showed up at minicamp, and then they found out that the surgery hadn't gotten done, that the rehabilitation wasn't happening the way that they had expected it to, the team program wasn't happening, all those things, right? It ended up being a whole deal. So then he ended up having to go and get the surgery, and then he was out for the season. Since then, since he got the surgery, he hasn't really been at the facility, right? No reason for him to be. I mean, he showed up to the Baltimore preseason game last year, but outside of that, you don't really see him. Now he's at the facility, and we've talked about that over the course of the last couple of weeks, how big that is that he's been there from day one of OTAs, and then now you see him running these sprints in the Saints training facility. Remember that when a player has a concussion, they go through what's called concussion protocol, right? And there's steps, 4 or 5 steps that they have to go through that include doing, light work to doing aerobic type work to taking contact and being okay to finally being cleared. So there's sort of steps in the progress. And you'll also remember that a couple weeks ago, Dennis Allen talked about, hey, look, Mike's here. He's rehabbing. We're very excited about his progress. He still has some hurdles to clear, but we're hoping to have him ready by training camp. And a lot of people latched on to, he's got hurdles to clear, he's not ready, he's behind schedule. No, that's not what that means. What it means is just like the concussion protocol that we just talked about, the Saints probably have a regimen that they want him to do and achieve and check boxes before they're comfortable putting him out on the field. And so now seeing him running these full sprints in the Saints training facility, it kind of gives you a little bit of an insight that, hey, he's following a team sort of prescribed regimen, and this is a part of it. And to me, that's a major detail because that is something that is different than what we have seen from the relationship between the New Orleans Saints and Michael Thomas as of late. And that's, of course, something different because of the fact that he is in the facility, which is really the highlighting point here. Just like last week or a couple weeks ago, like the highlighting point was never really supposed to be that Jameis Winston had a limp. The highlight was supposed to be that he is participating in OTAs, not just present, but participating, throwing the ball, all that. Similarly here, it's not just the fact that he's running, it's the fact that he's running and at the facility and working with the team. The last piece that I'll mention around all this is that I would say that when the New Orleans Saints say that they want him ready for training camp, I would not expect that to be day one of training camp that he's full participation. I genuinely think, and this is just my speculation, this isn't anything that I know, but I genuinely think that Michael Thomas will probably have a ramp-up period at the beginning of at the beginning of training camp. And that you'll kind of see him at like walkthroughs, but not participating and things like that. And that's okay. That's okay. As long as he participates at some point during training camp. And I was on with Deuce Wyndham over at Who Dat Confessional last night. And he talked a little bit about like his timeline is that he's watching for is he going to be able to participate in the joint practices with the Green Bay Packers? And as long as he gets in before those, he's fine. And I think that's an interesting one because that actually goes beyond training camp. right? That goes into preseason at that point. So the Saints' expectations of what it means to have Michael Thomas available at the beginning of training camp might not be full-fledged that he's out on the field. Might be a little bit of a ramp up. Okay. At the end of every episode throughout the rest of the offseason, what I would like to do is try to get you 2 minutes of a big take. I'm kind of inspired by our Locked On Today podcast, which does a lot of great things by finding a big take from a host around the network and then posting it as its own feature. So I want to give you a take a day is what I would like to do. So today, for our 2-minute take, what I would like to do is talk to you a bit about the 2022 NFL draft class for the New Orleans Saints and what you need to be looking for over the course of the next 3 years, because that's when we can actually look back at this draft class and say, was it a good class? Here we go. So for me, what you need from this 2022 NFL draft class over the course of the next 3 years is at least one, maybe even two, 1,000-yard receiving seasons from Chris Olave and 2 full seasons played by Trevor Penning at left tackle. If you get those 2 things, that's it, those 2 things, then all of a sudden you know that this 2022 NFL draft class was an absolute success. If Alontae Taylor goes on to be a first-team All-Pro as a special teamer, you'll take it. If he goes on to be a starter at corner at some point in his career, you'll take it. You'll take all of those things. You also take DeMarco Jackson and Jordan Jackson getting some pretty good playing time, maybe even getting second contracts at some point after that 3-year period. But this 2022 New Orleans Saints NFL draft class is going to be defined by their 2 first-round picks, Chris Olave, Trevor Penning. Just like in 2017, it could have been defined only by Marshawn Lattimore and Ryan Ramczyk, but then you had all the other players pan out. So for this year, looking back at this year's draft class, 3 years from now, if Chris Olave has 1 or 2 1,000-yard receiving seasons and Trevor Penning has played 17 games for you at left tackle, you won that draft for yourself. Not really relative or comparing to other draft classes. We'll have to see what those look like. But if you walk away with 2 successful first-round selections by giving up a first-round selection a year from now, and you walk away with 2 bona fide starters on offense at premier positions like wide receiver and left tackle, then you are in a really, really good spot looking back at this draft class. And I think that they'll be able to do this, by the way. And I would even go a step further and say that I think Alontae Taylor, if he's able to get a second-team, first-team All-Pro on top of that, then you're even happier with that. And that could be at special teams. Doesn't have to be at corner. But as long as you get success from Chris Olave and Trevor Penning, the 2022 NFL draft class for the New Orleans Saints could be one of the most impactful since that incredible 2017 draft class that changed everything for the culture. All right, family, let me know what you think about today's 2-minute take. Discuss amongst yourself, discuss with your friends, discuss with me. Do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think the New Orleans Saints draft class has to do in the next 3 years in order to be deemed successful looking back to 2022? I appreciate y'all as always for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms. You can find us anywhere and everywhere, including on YouTube. For tomorrow's episode, make sure you come through. We're going to look ahead to the final round of OTAs and mandatory minis, get you ready for what you need to be watching, what you need to know, and what it is you won't want to miss. We got all that coming up for you in tomorrow's episode. For today, make sure you go and check out, make your second listen Locked On NFL, everything you need to know around the league in less than 30 minutes with some phenomenal personalities all across that show. You can find it free and available on all platforms as well, including on YouTube. I appreciate you as always for making me a part of your day. I'll see you tomorrow. But if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints, make sure that you follow along on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.